This program is part of Anchor's 2020 annual conference, one of many opportunities offered to Anchor members throughout the year. Anchor is the American network of community options and resources. Learn more about Anchor and explore membership benefits and options at anchor.org. We hope you enjoy today's session.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon on the second day of Anchor's virtual annual conference for 2020. Before we begin, I'd like to just cover a few housekeeping items for folks who are just joining us for the first time. We are offering closed captioning for this session. So if you would like to turn on the closed caption function on your Zoom control panel, just go to closed caption and then select show subtitles. We are going to be using the Q&A feature during this session. So if you have any questions for our presenters today, please submit them using the Q&A function. And then finally, we will be recording today's session. So if you miss any portion of this or you'd like to share it with your colleagues, please stay tuned for announcements from Anchor later this week when we have the recording and the presentation slides available for all of you to use as a reference. And with housekeeping items out of the way, I'd like to ask Barbara Merrill, Anchor's CEO, for her opening remarks. Barbara?
Thank you, Marie. I wish that we were all here in person so that we could give Marie just an absolutely huge round of applause for pulling off Anchor's first ever virtual conference. Incredibly great job, Marie. Obviously, we were all expecting to be seeing you in person in beautiful Miami. I love Miami. Reconnecting with those of you who always make our annual conference your premier event, meeting our first timers, our newcomers to conference, really celebrating our direct support professionals of the year in person. That is like, it is so painful that we don't get to hug people and meet them and shake your hands and take your pictures with us. But we love you and we're really excited about the virtual DSP awards that we're going to be doing next week. So the world obviously is a little upside down now. Here we are in Zoom land. So before I get started, I really want to give a whole lot of extra love to Anchor's Diamond, Platinum, and Gold partners, as well as our additional conference sponsors. We couldn't have done any of this without you guys. Transitioning from a conference where we charged registration fees to a virtual conference where we've been able to offer this to everyone for free, it wouldn't have happened without our strategic partners and sponsors. If you haven't already, I really, really urge you to check out the virtual office hours that are going on, a whole bunch of them tomorrow. Some already happened today and yesterday. I think you're going to find the content to be really rich. This is far more than just an exhibit hall. This is a real opportunity to speak with experts, learn what they have to offer, but also just hear some really interesting and different information that can help you get through this pandemic. So thank you, sponsors. So back to Zoomland. Let me just share. I really miss seeing you in person. I draw my public speaking energy from seeing you right in front of me. But I want you to know that I do see you. I see your pride in how your agencies are responding to this enormous public health challenge. I listen to your stories about how people aren't running away, they're demonstrating courage. I see the Rhode Island, incredible Rhode Island direct support professionals and staff from Refocus that formed an honor guard to welcome back from the hospital a COVID positive man who was coming home with hospice to die. They weren't running away. They were there to greet him. They were there to salute him and to support him and love him through his final days. But I also see your concern and at times your fear. I see your grief. I see your feelings of loss. I see you doing everything in your power to keep your staff and the individuals that you support safe. I see you looking at exploding costs and lost revenues, and I see you wondering how you're going to stay afloat. I see, as one of our Anchor board members shared with me so poignantly, you start your days energized and positive, but come nighttime, you're drained and depleted. I see that, hear that, I feel that. I am also riding this roller coaster of emotions. But we'll get through this, and we'll get through it by doing it together, taking one step at a time, mindful of tomorrow, but firmly planted in today. Being there for each other, that's so important. Making our collective voices heard, demonstrating quiet and calm leadership, doing the next best thing. That's how we do it. Sometimes we're doing it just by the minute. Sometimes we're doing it by the hour. Sometimes in these days, we're just making it up. But as Ben Testall, my favorite lawyer, Anchor's corporate attorney, reminded me in one of my many calls to him as we were dealing with the Miami hotel contract, as we were moving to cancel it and minimize our damage, he said to me, Barbara, if this stuff was easy, anyone could do it. Never before have you been asked to do so much with such shortages. Never have so many of you faced a future with such troubling questions about finding the resources to carry your organization. Never before has the question of best practice been so intertwined with life and death decisions. Never before has the world in which you work been so dominated by so many unanswered questions. But Anchor is with you. We're working 7 days a week, lobbying Congress, lobbying the Department of Health and Human Services, lobbying the Department of Labor, even lobbying the National Governors Association. We are supporting you. We're supporting our members across the states to share best agency level practices as well as best state responses. We're working 24/7, bringing you relevant educational resources, creating essential worker toolkits, leveraging the press to tell your story. Never have we worked harder. Never have we faced such a daunting challenge. Many of you are aware of our staff. I'm completely indebted to them. Some of them are really high profile. Goodness knows, our brand new Vice President of Government Relations, Shannon McCracken, she's only been on the job for 4 months. But whoa, she is a true Southern bulldog, and she has jumped into this role with just incredible passion, and she's getting it done. Her staff, Sarah Meek, Donna Martin, Doris Parfait-Claude, are the faces of our government relations team, and they are working relentlessly. I think I'm going to use that word about 6 more times in my remarks. They're supported so well by our communications team, Sean Luchtefeld and Andre Floyd. And this virtual conference with over, how many is it over? And the numbers are just going up and up and up. I think we might be up to 1,000 unique registrants. Marie Campos has done that. It's just incredible. But all those folks, all of us, we couldn't do it without our finance folks, Cindy Ramos and Melissa Peck. We couldn't do it without Jerry McCandless. We couldn't do it without Andrew Floyd, Andrew Vincent. We couldn't do it without Kate McNulty, who shepherds our partners. We just couldn't do it. And then with Gabrielle Sedor as our COO, coordinating and supporting virtually all of our member services with our brand new membership director, Lauren Middleberg. We continue to reach new heights, and we're doing it for you. So for all of us, never has the mountain been higher or the climb more perilous. But if we are all put on this earth for a purpose, then never have you or I been so blessed with the opportunity to make such a difference. Speaking personally, and for your anchor staff, let me say we have never been more proud to serve you, or more humbled by your heroic service, or more determined to make your path a little less daunting. Already this year, we've worked successfully across the aisle, always across the aisle, to advance our advocacy agenda. On March 3rd, which seems like several years ago, but it really wasn't, our bill to mandate the Department of Labor to create a standard occupational classification for direct support professionals was introduced. That's being led by Senator Hassan of New Hampshire and Senator Collins of Maine. A companion bipartisan bill was also introduced in the House of Representatives by Representatives Boyle, Fitzpatrick, King, Maloney, and Rice. I'm incredibly proud. I am so proud that the bill that was brought to us by Shirley Walker, the recently retired CEO of PAR, one of the Pennsylvania provider associations, the Isaiah Baker and Margie Harris Austin Act, was introduced in Congress, and it was actually passed into law and signed by the President of the United States in less than 3 months. Less than 3 months. It was championed by Pennsylvania's Representative Scanlon and Representative Emmer of Minnesota, rather. It authorizes states to reimburse, if they so choose, it's an optional thing, supporting individuals during short-term hospital stays. It immediately caught on, and it was included in the second COVID response bill. Also included in the COVID response bill was reauthorization, another short-term reauthorization of the money follows the person. So we're getting stuff done. Also, very, very significantly, we scored a major win in getting Medicaid providers included in the Paycheck Protection Program Small Business Administration loans. But our wildly important goal, as Shannon calls it, our wildly important lobbying goal has been from the start and remains securing cash payments for all of our members, regardless of how many employees you have or what your corporate status is. Medicaid and Medicare providers were explicitly excluded from the Small Business Administration loans before we focused our small members' grassroots and really went to town lobbying. But those loans obviously only help some of you. And from what we're seeing in the results of the provider fiscal impact survey that we're going to be releasing perhaps as soon as Thursday, those loans aren't even enough for many of you who qualified. But let me just pause for a minute, give a huge thank you to over 700 providers who answered that survey. This is what we are doing with it. We commissioned Alvalier, the same firm that we used back in 2017 during the block grant per capita cap fight, and the same firm that we used during the Department of Labor overtime Save Our Services campaign to analyze the data and release an independent validation of our survey. We're using it to bolster the personal stories, to just, here I go again, advocate relentlessly for you guys to receive payments from the emergency fund that was appropriated by Congress to the Department of Health and Human Services, and for dedicated funding in the next congressional package to cover overtime, hazard pay, personal protective equipment, and recoup losses from shuttered programs. So that's why I just, let me just stop again and thank you guys for your extraordinary responses to our action alerts. Over 35,000 of you have sent over 115,000 messages to Congress since we started our advocacy efforts specifically focused on COVID relief. Just sit, like as Gabrielle says to me and says to us, just sit with that for a minute. 35,000, 115,000 messages to Congress. That is incredible. If we were all together, I would pause and I would be saying to you guys, can you please just bring the roof down with your applause? That is amazing. But we're in Zoom land, so we can't do that. But this is what I need to share. I need you guys to stay with us. I need you to stay with us and help us cross the finish line on this. We need you to write letters to the editor. We need you to submit op-eds to your local papers. We need you to use your social media to amplify our messages, to amplify the magnitude of the need for funding. We need you to continue to demand that your members of Congress and the administration recognize you as being on the front lines of this awful scourge. In spite of the dark clouds, and there are dark clouds outside my window here in Alexandria, Virginia, in spite of the dark clouds that cast their shadow on all of our work, I am confident that we're going to do this together. So we can do this, and we're going to do this. I'm going to be sharing that we have had 70,000 activists pretty soon. We need a bigger boat. What's an anchor conference without me talking about us needing a bigger boat? Our boat is bigger, and let's make it even bigger. But let me close with a moment or a couple moments of celebration. This is Anchor's 50th anniversary. And this is the 20th anniversary of the Anchor Foundation. 2020 is also the 30th anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We thought we'd be kicking off this really important year of major milestones with a super fun pre-50th anniversary celebration party in Miami. We had really great plans. Rumor had it was more than a rumor, Chris Stevenson, chair of the Anchor Foundation, was going to be showing us a few salsa dance moves. But to quote the immortal Annie, and I know this is corny, guys, the sun will come out tomorrow. And the great news is that we've been able to rebook our 2021 conference right back at the same hotel in Miami. So Chris Stevenson, I know that you're out there. Jamie Steele, you're another great dancer. So many of you are big dancers. I know you guys are out there. You're going to get another chance to join, to get us all out on the dance floor with you. We're going to be doing the salsa. We're going to have sunshine. I think there'll be a lot of mojitos in the mix. A lot of us are going to be sneaking as many Cuban guava and cheese pastries as we can possibly imagine. Whatever floats your boat, we're going to be in Miami next year. But October comes before Miami, and we've got something pretty special happening. We're finalizing the details for a fabulous 50th anniversary gala that we have booked the National Archives for. You're going to hear a whole lot about it. It is the conclusion of our Included, Supported, Empowered campaign. Robert Budd, the president of the Anchor Board of Directors, just did a beautiful job talking about the importance of the campaign. We have so much to celebrate, and we're going to be able to do it. And we're going to be doing it in conjunction with our Fall Public Policy Conference in October. So I'm going to see you in person. It's going to be soon, but without further ado, it's my incredible pleasure to introduce you to John Raffaele. and talk about rock stars, talk about someone who probably could do some pretty good moves out on the dance floor. I don't know, John. I don't know if you're a dancer, but
Nope.
I know you do
Nope.
some pretty good moves on a stage floor. And so, for those of you who have seen John present, I'd put John up against anyone for the highest energy presentation. As NADSP's Director of Education Services, he's been inspiring direct support professionals, frontline supervisors, and all of us, all levels of agency, administration, and management, thought leaders, those of us who do the work in Washington. He's been inspiring all of us for years as he and his colleagues at NADSP work to elevate direct support professionals. I'm looking at John. I do love Zoom. As you guys do everything that you do to elevate direct support professionals as the true profession that they are. So thank you, John, for joining us today. Thank you for what you and all of you at NADSP do every single day. And over to you.
Hi, everybody. Barbara, thank you very much for your very kind words, but also I love the word you used, relentless, relentless. And as you're saying relentless, I would like to make this presentation for the next half hour or so relentlessly compassionate. I was asked to give some advice, some guidance, and to lend some support to how do agency providers and executives and leaders and administrators and supervisors, how do we support direct support professionals during this crisis? And that said, that is, as Barbara said, and all of us at the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, we have been working relentlessly for the last, since it seems like 5 years ago, but since this pandemic took hold of our entire world, what we have done over the course of the last many weeks, we've created quite a few resources and avenues of support for direct support professionals. And what I'm going to do is just share with you some of the things that we know direct support professionals can benefit from. But the reality is, and the secret is, we can all benefit from the suggestions I'm about to offer. It just so happens that direct support professionals, we are relying on them more and depending on them more now than probably we ever have been. And in so doing, of course, that is showing us what we've already known, that direct support professionals are essential, are critical, are invaluable. But we knew that, but now it comes time to not only give them even more fortification and resources, that as much as we can, beyond funding and beyond wages. That's another webinar, another topic. This is not so much about what we need to do in terms of policy for direct support professionals. This is what we need to do right now, today, and every day to really support them so that they can continue to do the work that they're doing and the profession that they're practicing under some of the most crucial, critical, and difficult circumstances that I know I've ever experienced in my professional life, let alone what direct support professionals have experienced over the last 30 or 40 years doing community supports. So that's what we're going to do. And let's start it out with something very simple, something we're all facing. Whether you're a direct support professional, obviously a person that receives supports, an agency executive, a state employee that is responsible for surveying programs, I don't care who you are in our system, we are all feeling anxiety. And anxiety is a word. We hear it a lot. We we probably all have different definitions of it. I felt obligated to give you Merriam-Webster's definition of it because it is a good one. I'm just going to indulge me. I'm going to read it to you. Anxiety. This is again from Merriam-Webster, actually from an actual dictionary. Remember these for you younger people? This is a dictionary. You used to get them in a bookstore. Now we obviously just Google or Wikipedia terms, but I'm going right to Webster's dictionary to give you the definition of anxiety. If I can read it. Painful or apprehensive uneasiness of mind over an impending or anticipated ill. Fearful concern or interest. And this is the big one. This is the one that really hits home. An abnormal and overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear, often marked by physiological and psychological signs. I think we all fall into that camp, all of us. And that said, direct support professionals specifically have to face that anxiety, have that anxiety likely, but then go do some of the most complicated and complex professional work known on the planet, which is supporting people with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, who, guess what? They're experiencing anxiety too. So when a direct support professional is at that point of interaction with that person who may not have COVID-19, who just might be obviously quarantined, and just facing each day with the isolation that a lot of us have been facing, where direct support professionals, they've not been able to necessarily isolate because they are essential workers. So they're taking their anxious souls to go support people who are anxious. And I think for all of the things I'm going to talk about in the next little while, anxiety is really the undercurrent for all of us right now. And anxiety is not a pleasant thing to experience. It's actually, it can be very uncomfortable. It can be very scary. I'll give you a self-disclosure. About 3 weeks ago, I had a classic anxiety attack, a panic attack. And talked to my physician about it, and my physician said, "Yep, you're right on target with many other people that are experiencing this unusual time, and it manifesting in a very physical way." For me, it was a very physical way. I was short of breath, heart palpitations, was dizzy, sweating. Oh no, I'm going to have a heart attack, or no, I have COVID. And what happened was, in the course of about 20 minutes or so, it subsided. I'm a social worker by trade and by practice and by profession. And I know I've seen anxiety attacks and panic attacks, and I know what anxiety is. It still doesn't matter once you experience something like anxiety that has come from a situation that has been forced upon us, like the COVID-19 crisis. It's scary. And what we need to do, and again, this is specifically for direct support professionals, what we can do as providers, as leaders, as managers, perhaps, what we can do to best support direct support professionals. In some cases, we might be, as a leader, as an executive, as a program director, we might be in the direct support role. Many organizations are experiencing, obviously, the workforce crisis that we all know about. And we have talked to hundreds of provider organizations and employees and provider organizations. There's a lot of people that are doing the support work that needs to be done right now in this critical time. But that said, whoever you are, First things first, we have to recognize our own level of anxiety and of dread and of fear and of all this stuff. And one thing we can do is help direct support professionals find that if it's in them, and chances are it is in them. We have the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals has a pretty active Facebook page. Many of you might be on it or aware of it. We monitor it all the time, and we do see tremendous amounts of reading between the lines. Direct support professionals are scared. Not about the work they do, not about that, but I think it's about the more global issues in and around this pandemic. So anxiety has to be recognized in order for it to be addressed. So that's what we're going to do throughout the rest of the presentation here. It's a matter of understanding that anxiety is that's the biggest beast we're dealing with right now. We, as organizations, as leaders in organizations, especially as leaders in organizations, we need to give permission for direct support professionals, but I think all of our staff, but particularly for direct support professionals, we need to give them permission to feel three things. One, afraid, because we would be lying to ourselves. I'm afraid. I bet you're afraid. This is scary. We still don't have a grasp on this virus. We still don't understand how it works and necessarily how it spreads. Let alone, here we are as direct support professionals, as organizations that are supporting often physically vulnerable human beings for whatever reasons, medical frailties, respiratory existing conditions that already are at play. Throw in the threat of the COVID-19 virus, and that makes anybody afraid. But with that fear, we can't just sit with that fear and just be afraid, obviously. And direct support professionals don't do that. If anything, they'll deny that. And we'll talk about that in a second. 2, frustration. There is frustration. And Barbara, you mentioned it earlier in your opening remarks. Things that a lot of providers all around the country are dealing with in terms of a lack of personal protective equipment. That's frustrating. The lack of testing. Certain things in and around the inequities that happen when people with disabilities are put into the medical system for treatment. Sometimes many people that are probably on this call know that there's some discrimination that still exists even in 2020 against people with disabilities. And that gets frustrating for all of us, but especially for direct support professionals who might be those hospital support staff that are seeing, somebody being perhaps denied something that another person is getting. That's frustrating, let alone not having masks or shields or whatever it might be. And the third piece is anger. Anger is the manifestation, ultimately, of about 3 things: sadness, terror, and pain. Those three things are the root, and frustration a little bit, are the root of anger. If you trace back any recent time you've been angry, and I can just go to this morning for me with my children, I was sad. I was sad that they were frustrated because they can't be in school, in the typical school that they go to, and they were having meltdowns. And I got angry because they were loud, and I got mad, and I yelled. When I traced it back, I was sad. Anger is very common currently. We're seeing it whether you're shopping at Walmart and people are visibly angry, verbally angry, up to and including even fisticuffs over toilet paper. People aren't just angry. It has a root. And that root is something we have an obligation to if we can mitigate as executives, as leaders, as supervisors, we should, and we will talk about that. So fear, frustration, sadness, terror, all can lead to anger. Now, here you go. We have an obligation to give permission for our staff to feel this. We also have an obligation, and they have an obligation, not to let it interfere with their professional practice. And that's where we come in. How do we offer an avenue, an outlet for direct support professionals or any staff to cope and to address their fear, their frustration, their anger, and not bring it to the people they're supporting, not bring it to their teams, not bring it into team meetings in a negative, destructive way. And that can happen. That can happen. Maybe some of you are seeing that. But I think what I'm offering you, when you see that anger present itself in your staff, look deeper, go deeper, and you're going to find that somebody's sad, somebody's terrified about something, or somebody's in some kind of pain, personal pain, or even physical pain. But think about that and chew on that a little bit as we proceed forth, as you proceed forth, leading direct support professionals during this pandemic. So here's the other side of it. It's okay to be okay. And this is where you almost have to be almost an amateur psychologist in some ways, right? A lot of direct support professionals, we know this, a lot of direct support professionals, what they wind up doing, they forge ahead. They forge ahead oftentimes at the expense of their own self-care. And they might appear okay, and that's good. But we have, I believe, I think, the responsibility to make sure they're actually okay. And I think there's plenty of folks out there that are. The first responders that are out there, whether they are the police officers, the emergency medical technicians and paramedics, firefighters, they're out there and they're okay on the surface. They have to be. They've got to operate. They've got to function. But I read this morning in the New York Times one of the most tragic stories I've read thus far. An emergency room, a physician, an emergency room physician, but a physician that was on the front lines in New York City. Not only did this person, she acquired COVID-19 and then recovered. She went back to work, but it got too much. And again, a very sad story. She went home to where she lived in Charlottesville, Virginia, and she committed suicide. Was she okay for the last couple months? I don't know. Apparently not. But being okay, all right, being okay is okay, but we do have to do a little digging, because when we get back to this, we have to give permission for all these other things in order to get to the point where we are substantially enough okay to do our function as a direct support professional. And that is an ebb and flow. And it's going to be an ebb and flow until we get to a place where we understand more about this epidemic, more about the actual COVID-19 virus. When we have a little bit more knowledge, we're going to be less anxious, that's for sure, and less frustrated and afraid, and certainly less angry. But it's also okay to be okay. Other piece of this, there's something called survivor's guilt, which I'm not going to get into, but it happens a lot when people get through a crisis or a tragedy, and they get to the other side, and they have been unscathed. In this instance, maybe you're working with people who have succumbed to COVID-19. And you as a direct support professional, I know we're getting more and more of these stories. The people that you're supporting as a direct support professional, they're passing away, let alone coworkers. That's also happening to a lesser degree, but it's still happening. But then you are there and you're still alive. you haven't gotten sick. That can take a toll. That's called survivor's guilt, and that can do all kinds of interesting things psychologically to people. But ultimately, we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, how we can respond to that, again, as leaders, as supervisors, as people who are directing direct support professionals. But this thing about being okay, we just got to just be careful that people aren't wearing a mask of being okay and inside not okay. Facts, just the facts. Now, I bet many of your organizations, you are just plastering your staff with the latest information on COVID-19, on supporting people with this disease, with the virus, whatever the facts might be. I happen to live in New York State. That's where I'm presenting from. I live in Woodstock, New York, and the beautiful Catskill Mountains. I'm very lucky. I have you can see my pine attic where I have my office. And this is where I do my work. But this is not political. This is not political at all. And I know, Anchor, you work in the political environment, indeed. This is not political. This is about my governor, Governor Andrew Cuomo, I bet many of you have heard of. What he does every day has been really helpful to certainly the citizens of New York State, but he says this pretty much every time he gives a press conference every morning. Just the facts. I got to tell you the facts, not opinions, not about opinions, not about people's ideas, about the facts. When it comes to facts, I think direct support professionals, they need them. They need information. And if we're not providing them with information that is relevant to what they're doing, specifically relevant to the populations with whom they're doing direct support. If direct support professionals are working with people that have, for instance, compromised respiratory issues, whether it's COPD or emphysema or whatever, and there is a risk of a respiratory medical emergency. Those direct support professionals need to know probably a little bit more about the assessment process of acute respiratory disease, maybe a little bit more about what to do in the event somebody is showing certain signs and symptoms of a respiratory distress that might be a little different for somebody with COPD than with somebody who doesn't have it. Because this virus is just so mysterious still, we are getting more facts, but even the CDC yesterday put out a whole list of new and extra symptoms that we need to look for when it comes to possibly being infected with COVID-19. So I'm not going to get into what the specific facts are in certain situations, but DSPs need that information. They need those facts, because what that will do, that will reduce anxiety. And that might sound obvious. That might sound, oh, hello, Captain Obvious, John. The reality is we do hear from direct support professionals, they're not being given as much information in certain situations as they should. And that's where we as leaders in organizations, as administrators especially, whether we are in the medical department of our organization, the nursing department, the clinical department, any clinical department, behavioral clinical work is also critical at this time. Whether or not we're dealing with COVID-19 and that horrible virus, there's also plenty of people we support who are young, who are spry, who may have very strong personalities that are cooped up, maybe in a group home situation or some kind of isolation. Social distancing takes its toll on anybody. It'll take its toll especially on somebody that might have issues in and around the lack of ability to run around. And so you might want to make sure that you're supporting somebody that has that's on the autism spectrum, and they might have a lot of energy, and they might need a lot more exercise than the average person. How do we give information to the direct support professionals to support, to best support? What are the best practices for supporting people in this situation? It's the point of this, giving direct support professionals information and facts, not opinions, not about what you think should be done, but literal facts that are coming from, whether it's the CDC, the World Health Organization, wherever the bona fide information is that you are getting as a provider, whether it's your state, wherever, that has to get filtered and ultimately distributed to direct support professionals. Routine. This is two parts to this. Direct support professionals are actually really good at developing routines with the people they support. And we know, anybody that's been in this business long enough knows routine is our friend, especially when we're providing congregate supports. That's for darn sure. Breakfast is at 7:30, 8 o'clock, it's time to, get ready to go wherever you're going to go, whether it's some day program or if it's to an employment situation, whatever. Routine is good. Routine is not only good just generally for human beings, it's scientifically proven to help with certain alleviation of anxiety and depression. I don't have time to get into this, but I did a little research, and I've got a really great research article, and it's about what routines do. They put our brains on autopilot. Now, given this pandemic, right, we have been blown apart. Routines have been completely destroyed for a lot of people. Obviously, a lot of people we support, but also for a lot of direct support professionals. Changes in shifts, day programs closing, and those direct support professionals needing to maybe do evening or overnight shift work. When routine becomes compromised or affected, it can mess you up. So getting back to routines, this is where we can come in, again, as agency administrators. I'm thinking specifically as a like a residential manager or a program director. We can get at this point, we can get very creative with scheduling so that we can get some routine back into play. And that I can't give you what those routines are. That's dependent on your organization. That's dependent on the people you support. That's dependent on your culture. But I'll tell you this, there's enough evidence that shows routine can really lend itself to regular normalcy, and normalcy brings us a sense of calm and gets us back to a place of homeostasis. Don't you love that word? I love that word, homeostasis. Back to normal. Again, what normal is, that's also out for the jury to decide what normal is. But what I'm alluding to is normal being the where we used to be. Maybe we're not going to go back there, but what we need to do with direct support professionals is offer them a semblance of routine if they're not able to get it themselves. Marie, you good? Yes, Marie?
Hey, John, sorry to interrupt. I just
That's
wanted
okay.
to do a gentle time check
Yep.
for about 20 minutes, and I want to try to make sure we have some time for Q&A.
You got it. Thank you. I'll talk all day, so you just got to shut it off. Just shut the screen off. That's all you got to do, Marie. So, okay, I'll go for it here. Here we go. Now, this is so important. Encourage people to, whatever that might be in their life, whether it's the practice of their faith, but something meaningful to that person. And this goes not at the work site, obviously, necessarily, but this is about how do you support people, how do you support direct support professionals to engage with their faith a lot of direct support professionals come to this work with spiritual backgrounds, with religious backgrounds. I know there's faith-based organizations that probably have faith-based opportunities for direct support professionals and for obviously for the people you support. What I'm getting at is you as the supervisor, you as that person that's directing direct support professionals, encourage them to maybe look at what can give them meaning. Because what that does, now it doesn't have to be religious, music, art, nature, yoga, things that we can take 5 minutes a day and bring us to that place of meaning. All of us have that in us and all of us need it. Meditation, whatever it is, you as that person that maybe is seeing that direct support professional that you're working with on a higher anxiety level than not, you can say, hey, what do you do? What do you do to kind of take care of yourself in terms of, just relaxing and finding comfort and meaning in this very, very, very difficult time and difficult world? And then you get the conversation going and you encourage your direct support professionals to look at something that can, again, bring them to a place of peace and of a little bit of sanctity in their very busy lives. This is critical. It's very interesting. Barbara talked about it at that, here we are in Zoom world, and it's a weird world. This is my second time presenting to an audience, and I can't be with you, and I can't joke with you, and I can't shake your hand, and I can't give you a hug. It's very hard. It's very difficult. It's very weird, but it is where it is right now. Connecting with others is so critical. We have been put on, many of us in the United States have been isolated by regulation, by dictum, got to go shelter in place, you can't go out. That takes its toll. It takes its toll on anybody and everybody. That said, the other side of it, it's interesting. This technology like Zoom that we're using right now, the National Alliance for Direct Support Professional Staff, Joe and Dan and Desiree and Nicole and myself, we meet 3 times a week. We have never been so connected. Yes, we're not there giving hugs and having coffee with each other, but we're connected. And that's work. That's one thing. That's work. But I also can tell you, and I think many of you, and I've been reading these stories, in the news, people are reaching out to one another using the phone more, not texting, talking. So beyond coworkers, beyond the people, the direct support professionals that you are supervising and leading, beyond their milieu of work, encourage them to find their connections with their loved ones in their own community, with social distancing at play. But the reality is that connection to other human beings, as I'm sure Al Condalucci talked about yesterday, is critical for our overall health, mental health and otherwise. So encourage that. Encourage exercise. This is straight ahead. Obviously, you do this with some tact and with obviously always encouraging somebody. If you're going to start an exercise program or going to do exercise, probably you want to consult with your physician to make sure there's no underlying reasons why you shouldn't exercise. But we know there's so much scientific proof exercise does wonders for direct support professionals who have very often stressful jobs. Exercise reduces stress. And I'm not going to get into the physiology of exercise, but we know it. It's scientifically proven. You don't have to do a 5-mile run. You can just do a couple push-ups and maybe a couple jumping jacks and take a walk. And maybe you can even do that in the context of the people you're supporting. But the bottom line is exercise is critical right now, as it always is, and encourage it. Sleep. There is a sad reality. Direct support professionals, we know statistically they have 2, sometimes 3 jobs beyond the one that they're doing with you and your organization. Sleep becomes something that's sought after it becomes kind of a treat, as opposed to something that, if not given serious attention, it can lead to all kinds of nasty things. Not only mental issues and fatigue, obviously, and lack of clarity, and mistakes get made when people are tired, but it's also physiological. We know that if you can get into a regular sleep cycle, and that's very hard for direct support professionals, but if you can regular sleep cycles and good sleep, and do some research, and maybe work, if you have a clinical team, and maybe some psychologists on your staff in your organizations, or of some recommendations for best sleep practices. Encourage direct support professionals to try and sleep. These next two, critical. We are going to see more and more people die from COVID-19, as well as all of the other deaths that take place. As a direct support professional, we support people, and people die, and it's always, always, always difficult. Grief is going to be there. As organizations, we're going to have to, I believe, up our game and make sure that we're even a little bit more equipped to offer professional grief support services, whether it's individual support services to our staff, group counseling situations. But this can't be done kind of as an extra. It needs to be, in our opinion, and the way we're seeing it, and the more and more we're hearing from direct support professionals, they deserve a place of professional fair witness. When you have people die in this volume, and that's what we're seeing, I hope it doesn't continue to rise, but we're seeing it rise because of the nature of the people we support and their issues with medical preconditions. People with intellectual developmental disabilities they're at risk, and they're going to die. DSPs are going to need assistance with this, as they always have, but I think this is an opportunity for us, again, as agency leaders, to put in place formal ways where people can voluntarily seek out professional guidance. And this is the last slide. If it gets to the point where you are seeing your staff, whether it's a direct support professional or whether it's your executive director, in this time, in this pandemic, with this anxiety that we're all facing, we all could use perhaps professional assistance. If your organization has an employee assistance program, wonderful. Make sure that is well advertised. But sometimes it even might be a reach out to somebody that you see there's something going on. Again, you do this always in concert with your human resources department, if you have one of those. You make sure you're not at all discriminating ever against anybody, but at the same time, you have an obligation. If your staff member is obviously, visibly shaken to the point where you believe they're going to need some professional assistance, by all means, you need to refer them to that. And again, always work with your supervisor and with your agency, human resources, executive team, in any kind of reference to professional assistance when it comes to counseling. But the reality is, these types of situations can lead to depression, anxiety, up to and including suicidal ideation and suicidal behavior. And we don't want that. We want to mitigate that at all costs. So with that, you're not alone. The National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, that's our team right there. You can reach out to us, our partners and our friends at Anchor. You can reach out to Anchor, and you can specifically reach out to me individually at any time if you have any questions. And I know right now, I think we're going to open up, Marie, we're going to open up 2 questions if there are any, or comments about any of the content that I shared with you today. But thank you for hanging out and listening. And please do not hesitate to contact me directly. So Marie, do we have any questions, any comments?
We do, and thank you very much, John. And thank you, Barbara, too, for your opening remarks. So yeah, so we have a few minutes. And so really quick, in terms of the slides and the presentation video, we will send those out to folks later this week. So just keep an eye out for an announcement from Anchor when the materials become available, including John's slides here, so that you have some of the contact information and some of the resources he shared. In terms of questions, so here's, if folks have any, please send them through the Q&A, and we'll use that as our queue. And then if we run out of time, we'll also we'll compile your questions and send them to John. And he's offered very kindly to address those offline, and then we'll also share those with folks later this week. So jumping into the questions from the audience, how can we support DSPs who are not currently working because of COVID-19? Do you have any suggestions?
That's such a good question, because they're probably going through tremendous amounts of anxiety, and probably maybe do I need to get another job? Can I get another job? Oh my gosh, I think two things you can do is a very sincere continued reach out to that direct support professional. Keeping in line with HIPAA and with confidentiality, keeping people abreast of what's going on. You know, what's going on at the ranch. That's important. Connecting those direct support professionals to the people they support. Very critical. And I know that's happening for people that are, disengaged, that are put on, they can't go into a program for whatever reasons. Maybe they're managerial level staff that have been it's indicated you can't go into the house because it's or the residents or whatever, because there's a risk of spreading this mysterious illness. The connection can't be understated, whether it's a text, whether it's a phone call, whether it's going to stand outside of a window and yelling in to somebody. But that would be, I think, one suggestion that I would have for that issue. Keeping people connected.
Thank you. Another question is, during this pandemic, a lot of us are eating our emotions, which is turning into, a health concern. Honestly, so the question is, how can a DSP get a handle on just eating healthy during this time?
See this bag of candy? See this bag of candy? That's in my office.
Drinking too, all of it,
yeah.
Right? All of the coping.
All of it. Oh, such an important question, right? I'm not a nutritionist by any means, so I can't give any nutritional advice or dietetic advice. I think we do gotta give ourselves a little bit of a break. This is a rough time, and I think if you're pounding like a box of Twinkies every day, probably not good. But if you've got the guilty pleasure of having a Twinkie, while you're watching Netflix or whatever you're doing, I would not beat yourself up. I think you need to, if you know, and if you think you're eating too much, you probably are. And the best advice I can give you is just to monitor it as best you can, but don't beat yourself up. I think booze, it's a big one. I know I've been probably drinking a little bit more wine in the evenings than I should. And I try to cut it back. But I'm not drunk now. The reality is, guys, I think we do need to strike the balance and be careful we don't overindulge. And I think that goes for any time in our lives. But right now it's tricky because we're all anxious. We're anxious. And I think that person said, right, Marie, that they're emotional eating. And that can happen. Just monitor it the best you can. If it gets to the point where you need like some help, there's all kinds of things like Noom that you can get, and Weight Watchers and whatever else, if it becomes an issue like that. Or if you have diabetes or some kind of a physical issue with food, you got to be careful. But I wouldn't beat yourself up.
Thanks, John. Here's another question.
Sure.
When a DSP, after being diagnosed with COVID-19 is back from being isolated, do you have any suggestions on how the colleagues and the folks that they work with can help welcome him or her back?
That's such a great question. There's two levels to that. Obviously, there's the medical clearance issue, and that's something I'm not going to address. I'm not a doctor or a physician, but the medical clearance obviously has to be all to specs and to regulation and to policy, so that the person can safely return. All right, so that needs to be in place, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. But I think also importantly, and this is what I can address, there's going to be a stigma. I've seen it. People, oh, in fact, I had a person drop something off at my home this past weekend who had COVID-19, and he's recovered, he's okay. But he dropped a bag off, and I was hesitant to pick up the bag. So there is a natural tendency to be a little afraid and a little hesitant, but I think we need to go a little extra to lose that stigma. Again, get the information, get the facts about the transmission of COVID-19, and we can't at all shun or ostracize somebody that has had the disease and has come back and has been medically cleared. But we are going to be a little hesitant, and I think it's okay to have the conversation with the person. Hey, man, wow, you had the COVID. Let's talk about it. What was it like? And I don't want to get it, and and have the information clearly available that you're not going to get it from a person that's been cleared. So, and again, that's the tricky thing, right? We don't know. This is we still don't know enough about the darn virus, but let's use the facts that we have at our disposal now.
Yeah, thank you. And here's another question. I think this is a really tough one as well. We have numerous DSP who work essential services remotely while also teaching their children who are home from school and daycare. And so they're really struggling with scheduling their day. Do you have any ideas of how we can support them in developing a routine that's going to work?
Yeah, it's literally, if you can, and I read about this, in fact, I wish I had more time. Literally, you sit down with that person, not sit down with that person, you zoom in with that person, or you call that person, and you go through it, and you literally create a calendar and a schedule that's based on the work components and the homeschooling components and whatever else components, especially if the person is doing remote supports. And you literally write out a calendar. And you do that based on the needs of obviously the direct support professional, the people being supported, the kids that are being homeschooled, or whatever it might be. I know I've done it with my world here with my children, where I live, and my kids, and we have it on a mark and whiteboard, and it changes, and it will change. But to have it visible, a routine that's visible, is incredibly helpful. And so that's a great question. That's what I would suggest. But you have to do it if you have the opportunity to sit down. If you're the manager of that person, you might have to take 15 minutes and just be on the phone with them and literally write out a routine.
Thank you. And I think we have time for this one last question. For
Yep.
DSPs who work in employment and rehabilitation services and have been providing services using telehealth or choosing not to work during this time, the question is, what is the best way to welcome them back to traditional services and back to community settings?
The way we would welcome anybody back to any journey that they've been on. Glad you're back. Things have changed. Wish you could have been here. Thank you for coming back. I think that's about it. I mean, I think things are going to be different for all of us in terms of how we provide support, whether it's employment supports, whether it's day supports. But I think we need to welcome people back with open arms, well, at social distance measures, but open arms and open minds, and in fact, a sense of great gratitude, that, my gosh, thank you for coming back. We're going to see the economy obviously has taken a hit. We're going to see an influx of new staff coming into organizations. It's happening already. When the economy goes down, direct support professional jobs become really popular. That's also another area where we're going to bring new people in, make sure we help them understand the mission of what direct support's about. We introduce those people to people with disabilities in a way that's celebratory and welcoming, obviously. But I think we welcome people back.
And I think one last question, DSP anxiety is often caused by the financial stress. And so the question here is, aside from reiterating the advocacy work that our members are doing, so the question is, what can our members say to them to kind of help them?
I hear you, Marie. I think there's a couple things here. Again, we could have a whole afternoon on this. The work that Anchor is doing, the work that the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals is doing, in terms of the standardized occupational classification that we're gonna get. The best we can do, we can't make money come out of trees, and it's not going to happen that way. To help your staff understand, the providers have an obligation to help their staff understand that we are working our tails off, especially using this crisis. We're going to use this crisis so that we can prove once and for all to our funders, to politicians that make these laws and create these rates, that this is beyond the minimum wage occupation. This is a profession that deserves a professional wage, and we're working towards that. At this point, whatever you can do as a provider to offer hazard pay and to any kind of extra reinforcing monetary remuneration's wonderful if you can do it, but it's very hard right now for all of us. Recognition, very important. Real sincere recognition. Take advantage of anything that can in your community that is offered to essential workers, whether there's discounts in supermarkets or stores. I know that's happening all around the country. Make sure that you have identification for your direct support professionals if you are in a state where they're considered essential workers, where they can go take advantage of essential worker kind of benefits, whatever those things might be. It's a tough question, and I really can't answer it other than we're going to use this and tell the providers, you tell your staff that you have two national organizations that are pushing this issue, and we're not going to let it rest. I wish I could be more helpful.
It's a really tough question, and we're all working on that together, I think. So I think with that, I am going to have to conclude today's session. Just want to thank you again, John, and everybody who has joined us today, and for Barbara for joining us and kicking us off on our second day of this virtual conference. And just thank you all. We'll send the recording, the webinar materials as soon as they're available, and hope to connect with a lot of you on the next session. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the afternoon.